Good afternoon. Today we have the pleasure of interviewing a luminary in the world of accounting, and in that we are interviewing Michel Prada, who is Chair of the Board of Trustees of the IFRS Foundation. I think most accountants will have heard something about the IFRS Foundation, may not always know all of the details. So today we're going to have an opportunity to understand a little bit about yourself as an individual and also the work of the foundation. So if we may, just start off with, what does the IFRS Foundation do? What do they stand for? And in preparation for this interview, I picked up on a phrase that was used on the website to describe the mission of the IFRS Foundation. And it says, high quality financial information is the lifeblood of capital markets. Can you explain to us how the foundation tries to achieve this outcome?
Well, yes, you have to do a little history on that. And before the events you mentioned, I was a securities regulator. I chaired the technical committee of IOSCO, and at the end of the 90s, it became clear that we needed to improve the accounting environment. Following the Asian crisis, we needed global standards that would be of high quality to protect investors and to allow them to make good choices in their allowance of capital. So IOSCO endorsed international standards in the early 2000s in Sydney. And this started the whole story. The IASC, the former body that set standards, was transformed into the IFRS Foundation. And this organization really was set up to develop a set of high quality global accounting standards and financial reporting standards. And this organization was set up along a model which was not familiar to many countries in the world, which was to have an independent body, a technical body to set the standards, the IASB, monitored by a foundation with trustees looking at the work of the IASB, designing the strategy, organizing the funding, appointing the people, and monitoring the process, what we call the due process, to make sure that all participants would be listened to and that the decisions made by the IASB would be consistent with the environment and all the views of the technicians. So this is fundamentally the structure, the Board of Trustees, the IASB, and the trustees play also a big role in the sort of diplomacy of the organization.
That's an interesting background, especially when we reflect on the composition of the Board of Trustees. So sitting as we are in South Africa, we obviously take note of the presence on that board of Professor Wiseman Kuhlu. And of course, from our perspective, we ask ourselves the question, how is it that the board is comprised? Because we see it includes people from very developed markets to emerging markets to middle markets, etc. So it's of interest to us to understand how does that come about? And then secondly, also to understand that once someone has been appointed onto the board, what is the typical life in the year of a trustee? What do they do?
Well, let me first say that I'm very happy to be back to Johannesburg. By the way, we had a meeting here in 2013, and I personally have visited your country several times for IOSCO purposes or even for my own pleasure. And I would like to say that we are privileged to have Wiseman Kuhlu on our board. He's an immense personality, he's a remarkable person, and a good example of what we want to achieve. The composition of the Board of Trustees is meant to represent different skills, different regions, sensitivities, 22 trustees altogether, coming from the Americas, from Europe, from Asia, Oceania, from Africa, and at large. So we have preparers, former securities regulators, former auditors. We have people coming from different cultures and different sensitivities who work together like a group of friends to build the strategy and to make sure that the organization functions well. Now, what are they doing individually? Well, first of all, as they belong to the board, they have to prepare, attend, and participate in 3 boards a year. They also have to participate in committees. We have several committees: audit and finance, human capital, the due process oversight committee, which is extremely important because it looks into the way the standards are set up, really, and it's important to make sure that everybody has been listened to, that transparency was there, and that the final decision by the board was appropriate. So the trustees do this job collectively and individually with their skills and their knowledge. And they also have to play a role, I would say, at the regional level, advocating for the IFRS Foundation, representing the foundation, and trying to convince those who have not yet adopted to go on the road to IFRS. And Wiseman, you mentioned him, was extremely efficient from that point of view. He has helped us develop in Africa remarkably.
Super. So if we turn to the environment in which financial reporting must exist, it seems to waver from being very slow-paced, almost glacial in the pace at which it develops. And then all of a sudden, a major crisis will emerge, and there's a flurry of activity and so forth. So one is sometimes at pains to understand that there's a deliberateness behind all of that from a distance. So I would like you to just reflect in terms of your term that you've had and some of the changes that have taken place in the functioning of the foundation, some of the achievements that you're proud of, and some of even the challenges that you see going forward from your perspective as an insider, so that we can have an appreciation for it.
Okay, well, the first thing I am proud of, not individually, but as a collective achievement of the organization, is the remarkable success of the development of IFRS throughout the globe. Allow me to remind you that it was only 18 years ago that we started this undertaking. And at that time, there was no country using IFRS. Some of them were referring to IASC standards, but none of them would really implement international standards. 18 years later, 140 countries have adopted IFRS. And those that have not adopted yet fully are on the road. I mentioned Japan, very close to with a third of market cap in Tokyo in IFRS. China, which is nearly word for word IFRS. India is in a similar situation. Even the United States, that have kept the US GAAP, have recognized IFRS for foreign registrants. So the objective that was set up by IOSCO, in a way, has been achieved during that period of time when I was lucky to and privileged to work with the IFRS Foundation. Here in Africa, a few years ago, a couple of years ago, OHADA decided to join. And I think, again, Wiseman played a role and PAFA played a role on this. So we can see that today it has become really a truly global standard, exactly what the G20 wanted when in Pittsburgh and London they urged the community to develop a set of global accounting standards. So this is the main achievement, really. Another one is that the organization functions very well. We have no crisis, we have no problems, really. Sometimes we are struggling with some financial issues, but this is really marginal. And we've been recognized as a fairly efficient and effective organization. So these are the things that are positive. We still have some progress to make, a few countries to fulfill their adoption. We have to find a solution with our US friends, very close to us, remarkable standard, the US GAAP, sometimes a bit different from IFRS, but nevertheless, while we had a sort of convergence process at the beginning, this has come to a standstill after the financial crisis. We're still working together. We should make our best efforts not to diverge, to converge wherever possible. Now, what about the challenges? I see mainly two challenges besides the one of fulfilling the final objective of global adoption. One is the consequences of digitization, which will change the way bookkeeping will take place and possibly might have consequences on the standards themselves and the way we manage them, and all sorts of consequences on the functioning of markets, the functioning of the price discovery systems, and so on and so forth. And we have to manage this as well as we can. The second one is implementation. As we have become a global organization, clearly there is a need to make sure that the standards are implemented worldwide in a similar way, and that we do not see differences that would sort of ruin the objective of having the same language, the same presentation of the situation and performance of companies throughout the world. This is a big one, which requires excellent cooperation with securities regulators, auditors, national standard setters, and the like. And this is not exactly the same thing as standard setting, but it's also building a network of relationships that is efficient to master this issue of implementation. So I think these are the main ones. I mentioned two. I could mention another one, which is sort of developing since a couple of years or so, which is the emergence of new initiatives with regard to corporate reporting in other areas. ESG, environmental, sustainability, governance, social issues. And of course, these are developments that are different from accounting. But there are some overlaps and some concepts that sort of are borderline. And we must make sure that we are consistent with our colleagues. We work with them very closely, but we have to make sure that we don't see a divergence in the way these new developments take place, to present to the investors and to the creditors and to the markets a sort of integrated approach to the information needed to analyze the situation and performance of a corporate.
So we can certainly conclude that the next chairperson won't be bored. There are many challenges still to be addressed, those that we know about and those that are yet to emerge. So in closing, on a personal note, so you've been in the IFRS Foundation for a long time. As you've just described, you've taken it through some significant moments, and you've now come to the end of your tenure. Any parting thoughts and feelings that you have as you depart the organization that you'd like to share with us?
Well, firstly, a regret, clearly, because I was involved in this since the inception, and I've been very happy and privileged to work with this organization, which is a remarkable one. I have lots of friends there throughout the world, so it's some nostalgia that I will leave the organization. At the same time, the show goes on, and I am relieved because I know that my successor will be a remarkable person, Aki Lee Cannon, who has a brilliant career as the governor of the Central Bank of Finland, twice a commissioner at the EU, twice a minister in Finland, an extremely experienced person who knows all financial issues and all accounting issues very well. So the future of the organization is for sure a brilliant one, under the technical leadership of Hans-Hugo Vorst, who has led the IASB for several years and has been a remarkable, energetic leader in developing the standards. One thing I didn't say, by the way, which I'm not proud of because I did not participate in it directly, is that we have achieved the job. I mean, all the standards have been delivered today. And this is something, you mentioned the sometimes lengthy process. And it is true that it took nearly 20 years to deliver the insurance standard. But the insurance standard is the last of the big standards that make the completion of the standard setting job. So I'm very optimistic for the future, and I think that is an excellent achievement and an asset for the development of free market economy in the world.
Michel, thank you very much for your time this afternoon and for your service.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.